President, as you said, the Security Council faces a vote next week on a resolution implicitly authorizing an attack on Iraq. Will you call for a vote on that resolution, even if you aren't sure you have the vote?
Yes. Well, first, I don't think it basically says that he's in defiance of 1441. That's what the resolution says. And it's hard to believe anybody saying he isn't in defiance of 1441, because 1441 said he must disarm. And yes, we'll call for a vote. No matter what the whip count is, we're calling for the vote. We want to see people stand up and say what their opinion is about Saddam Hussein and the utility of the United Nations Security Council. And so, you bet, it's time for people to show their cards, to let the world know where they stand when it comes to Saddam.
Are you worried that the United States might be viewed as defiant of the United Nations if you went ahead with military action without specific and explicit authorization from the UN?
No, I'm not worried about that. As a matter of fact, it's hard to say the United States is defiant about the United Nations when I was the person that took the issue to the United Nations September the 12th, 2002. We've been working with the United Nations. We've been working through the United Nations. Secondly, I'm confident the American people understand that when it comes to our security, if we need to act, we will act, and we really don't need United Nations approval to do so. I want the United Nations to be effective. It's important for it to be a robust, capable body. It's important for its words to mean what they say, and as we head into the 21st century. Mark, when it comes to our security, we really don't need anybody's permission.
Thank you, Mr. President. Even though our military can certainly prevail without a northern front, isn't Turkey making it at least slightly more challenging for us and therefore at least slightly more likely that American lives will be lost? And if they don't reverse course, would you stop backing their entry into the European Union?
The answer to your second question is I support Turkey going into the EU. Turkey's a friend. They're a NATO ally. We will continue to work with Turkey. We've got contingencies in place that should our troops not come through Turkey, not be allowed to come through Turkey. And no, they won't cause any more hardship for our troops. I'm confident of that. I appreciate that question a lot. First, for those who urge more diplomacy, I would simply say that diplomacy hasn't worked. We've tried diplomacy for 12 years. Saddam Hussein hasn't disarmed, he's armed. And we live in a dangerous world. We live in new circumstances in our country, and I hope people remember well, I know they remember the tragedy of September the 11th, but I hope they understand the lesson of September the 11th. The lesson is that we're vulnerable to attack wherever it may occur, and we must take threats which gather overseas very seriously. We don't have to deal with them all militarily, but we must deal with them. And in the case of Iraq, it is now time for him to disarm for the sake of peace. If we have to use our troops, we will. My faith sustains me.
Mr. President, as you know, not everyone shares your optimistic vision of how this might play out. Do you ever worry, maybe in the wee small hours, that you might be wrong and they might be right in thinking that this could lead to more terrorism, more anti-American sentiment, more instability in the Middle East?
Hutch, I think, first of all, it's hard to envision more terror on America than September the 11th, 2001. We did nothing to provoke that terrorist attack. It came upon us because there's an enemy which hates America. They hate what we stand for. We love freedom, and we're not changing. And therefore, so long as there's a terrorist network like Al-Qaeda and others willing to fund them, finance them, equip them, we're at war. And so obviously I've thought long and hard about the use of troops. I think about it all the time. It is my responsibility to commit the troops. I believe we'll prevail. I know we'll prevail. And out of that the disarmament of Saddam will come a better world, particularly for the people who live in Iraq. This is a society, Ron, which has been decimated by his murderous ways, his torture. He doesn't allow dissent. He doesn't believe in the values we believe in. I believe this society, the Iraqi society, can develop in a much better way. I think of the risks. I've calculated the cost of inaction versus the cost of action. And I'm firmly convinced if we have to, we will act in the name of peace and in the name of freedom.
Mr. President, if you decide to go ahead with military action, there are inspectors on the ground in Baghdad. Will you give them time to leave the country, or the humanitarian workers on the ground, or the journalists? Will you be able to do that and still mount an effective attack on Iraq?
Of course. We will give people a chance to leave. And we don't want anybody in harm's way. You shouldn't be in harm's way. The journalists who are there should leave. If you're going and we start action, leave. The inspectors, we don't want people in harm's way. And our intention is we have no quarrel with anybody other than Saddam and his group of killers who have destroyed a society. And we will do everything we can, as I mentioned, and I mean this, to protect innocent life. I've not made up our mind about military action. Hopefully this can be done peacefully. Hopefully that as a result of the pressure that we have placed and others have placed, that Saddam will disarm and or leave the country.
President, good evening. Sir, you've talked a lot about trusting the American people when it comes to making decisions about their own lives, about how to spend their own money. When it comes to the financial costs of the war, sir, it would seem that the administration surely has costed out various scenarios. If that's the case, why not present some of them to the American people so they know what to expect, sir?
Ed, we will. We'll present it in the form of a supplemental to the spenders. We don't get to spend the money, as you know. We have to request the expenditure of money from the Congress, and at the appropriate time, we'll request a supplemental. We're obviously analyzing all aspects. We hope we don't go to war, but if we should, we will present a supplemental. But I want to remind you what I said before. There is a huge cost when we get attacked. There's a significant cost to our society. First of all, there's the cost of lives. It's an immeasurable cost. 3,000 people died. It's a significant cost to our economy. Opportunity loss is an immeasurable cost, besides the cost of repairing buildings and cost to our airlines. So the cost of an attack is significant. If I thought we were safe from attack, I would be thinking differently. But I see a gathering threat. I mean, it's a true, real threat to America, and therefore we will deal with it. And at the appropriate time, Ed, we will ask for a supplemental, and that'll be the moment where you and others will be able to recognize what we think the dollar cost of a conflict will be. You know, the benefits of such an effort, if in fact we go forward and are successful, are also immeasurable. How do you measure the benefit of freedom in Iraq? I guess if you're an Iraqi citizen, you can consequence of taking a dictator out of power who has. How would you weigh the cost of that? Those are immeasurable costs. And I weigh those very seriously. I mean, in terms of the dollar amount, we'll let you know here pretty soon. Sell them. They may end up in the hands of dictators, people who are not afraid of using weapons of mass destruction, people who try to impose their will on the world or blackmail free nations concerned about it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. President, millions of Americans can recall a time when leaders from both parties set this country on a mission of regime change in Vietnam. 50,000 Americans died. The regime is still there in Hanoi. and it hasn't harmed or threatened a single American in the 30 years since the war ended. What can you say tonight, sir, to the sons and the daughters of the Americans who served in Vietnam to assure them that you will not lead this country down a similar path in Iraq?
It's a great question. Our mission is clear in Iraq. Should we have to go in, our mission is very clear. Disarmament. And in order to disarm, it will mean regime change. I'm confident we'll be able to achieve that objective in a way that minimizes the loss of life. No doubt there's risks with any military operation, I know that. But it's very clear what we intend to do. And our mission won't change. Our mission is precisely what I just stated. We have got a plan that will achieve that mission, should we need to send forces in. Last question.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the coming days, the American people are going to hear a lot of debate about this British proposal of a possible deadline being added to the resolution or not. And I know you don't want to tip your hand. This is a great diplomatic moment. But from the administration's perspective and your own perspective, can you share for the American public what you view as the pros and cons associated with that proposal?
You're right, I'm not going to tip my hand.
But can you help them sort out the debate?
Anything that's debated must have a resolution to this issue. It makes no sense to allow this issue to continue on in the hopes that Saddam Hussein disarms. The whole purpose of the debate is for Saddam to disarm. We gave him a chance. As a matter of fact, we gave him 12 years of chances, but recently we gave him a chance starting last fall. And it said, last chance to disarm. The resolution said that. And had he chosen to do so, it'd be evident that he's disarmed. But he hadn't. So more time, more inspectors, more process, and our judgment is not going to affect the peace of the world. So whatever is resolved is going to have some finality to it so that Saddam Hussein will take us seriously. I want to remind you that it's his choice to make as to whether or not we go to war. It's Saddam's choice. He's the person that can make the choice of war and peace. Thus far, he's made the wrong choice. If we have to, for the sake of the security of the American people, for the sake of peace in the world, and for freedom to the Iraqi people, we will disarm Saddam Hussein. And by we, it's more than America. A lot of nations will join us.